Welcome to today's webcast. This call is being recorded. And now to begin the program, I'll turn the call over to Chris Flack. Please go ahead.
Hey, Vicki, thank you so much, and welcome everybody in our audience to today's webcast, Email Archiving, Compliance, and Ransomware, How to Reduce Risk, Cost, and Complexity. Today's Supercast has been sponsored by Arcserve and Unitrends and brought to you by RedmanMag.com. Thank you all for attending. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you joining us for today, so thanks so much. So just a few quick reminders before we get today's Supercast started. We are going to have a Q&A session once all three presentations are done for the day. Please feel free to use the Ask a Question box at any time during today's presentation to ask a question to our presenters. We really appreciate the feedback, the response, the participation. No question is silly. No question is stupid. We just really want you to participate with us and have some fun. So anything you guys want to contribute, please feel free. You can get a copy of the presentations down there in the resource tab of your doc. We also have lots of other great resources from the companies involved today down there in the dock of your screen. Please feel free to view them and make sure that you take away a copy of everything for today's program. We would appreciate that. You could also go down to the dock of your screen right down there and send a little link to a friend right now via the little paper airplane icon. It'll send the link off to a coworker, and they can view, they can view the console with you and share the webcast with you. Please feel free to do that. You'll also receive an email within 48 hours after today's show where you can view the replay. We encourage you to share that with coworkers and colleagues as well. So thank you so much for that. Joining us for today's presentation, we have several great presenters. A little bit later on, you're going to hear from Dave LeClair. He is from Unitrends. And you're also going to hear from Christophe Bertrand. He is from Arcserve. But first up today is Greg Schultz. He is the founder and senior analyst with the IT infrastructure analyst and consulting firm Storage.io. He is a 25-year IT veteran, and Greg has worked as an IT customer, vendor, author, and industry analyst. He has worked with applications, servers, databases, network, storage, disaster recovery, backups, performance, and capacity planning. He is a noted author of numerous books. He holds a degree in computer science and master's in software engineering from the University of St. Thomas. And just some of the fun books that he's written that you could all check out, or some of the titles are The Green and Virtual Data Center, some software-defined data infrastructure essentials, and another one titled Cloud and Virtual Data Storage Network. Feel free to check those out when you find them. And without any further ado, I would let Greg take the floor so we can get started with the show. So Greg, please take it away.
Hey, great. Thanks a lot, Chris, for that welcome and opening. And hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Supercast with the theme of emailing, archiving, compliance, and ransomware. But what we want to focus on is how to reduce risk, cost, as well as complexity, all relevant and popular topics that we're going to talk about. So as Chris did mention, I am Greg Schultz from Server Storage.io. There's some information about me. I'm a Microsoft MVP. I'm a VMware vExpert. And I'm out on Twitter at Storage.io. My site is storage.io.com, storage.ioblog.com. But with those brief introductions out of the way, let's get into our actual conversation, which is around email archiving, ransomware, and related sort of topics. Before we get too deep, I want to take a step back and let's just frame up this conversation a bit. Let's frame up the discussion, which is take a quick look at some industry trends. Hopefully this is not a surprise, but that data is growing. Now here's the thing. We hear about big data. There's also little data. But there's variations of that. But part of the aspect here that I want to discuss, I want to convey, is this notion is that, sure, data is growing, but it's growing in terms of size, i.e. bigger files, bigger images, bigger attachments. That's that linkage to email. So as we're starting to use email as a means of not only sending notes back and forth, but messaging, managing, distributing content, maybe even data distribution. The size of those data, the size of those items, those entities, those objects, those files, those images continues to grow. But also the volume, the amount, the quantity of those documents. How often do you get an attachment where it's no longer just one attachment, but maybe multiple attachments? They might be Word documents, PowerPoints, Excel spreadsheets, videos, images, or other sorts of things. But we also have the value. And this is where that's something I find rather interesting it's occurring is that we've got these trends of structured data databases, which continue to grow. We call those little data. that you hear popular quite a bit around the growth of unstructured data, just regular files, videos, logs, whatever they happen to be, particularly with the new trends around IoT, Internet of Things, and AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all these other trends that are taking place. But then there's what sits in between, which can have a little bit of both attributes. Unstructured, meaning it's not structured. It's just documents, files, different things like that. But in between is this world of semi-structured. And a great example of semi-structured is one of our theme topics today, which is email. And that if you think about it, email itself has somewhat of a structure. When you have your email systems for sending, receiving messages, managing things like that. But often email, as I mentioned a little bit ago, is used for sending attachments. Often those attachments are unstructured documents, files, objects, entities, whatever you want to refer to them as or whatever their content is. So this is where email kind of falls into that unstructured space with these different sorts of types of data. And also because of the email, because of that messaging, because of sending things between different people, either in your own organization or to other organizations, via mobile devices, via traditional, whatever they happen to be, but also interacting with different venues, interacting across different systems, we also have this exposure risk that we're going to talk more about in just a little bit, but we also open the door for more things to happen. In that the structured databases, they may not be as vulnerable natively to things like ransomware or to other threats per se. However, those threats can be introduced, they could be interjected, they could gain their way into your organization via these emails, via attachments, and via other mechanisms. But what I want to bring the point here on this slide is that certainly the amount of data is growing, both in terms of the size of those attachments, but also the volume, the frequency. But the other thing that's happening with data in general is the value. The value is changing over time. The good news is there's data that you might know about that has no value. You can get rid of it. Okay? That's relatively simple. The other good news, which is that's what I show there in the red. If it's red, that means stop, delete it, get rid of it. The other is the data has value. It might be low value. It might have high value. It might have very high value. Okay? Well, that's green for go, which, again, you know what to do. You know how to protect, preserve, secure, and serve that information, whether they're regular documents, attachments, but it's known. Okay? Here's where the tricky area lies in, which is the unknown value, particularly the unknown value today of that information. And that information might be email messages. It might be what's inside embedded in the email. It might be what's as a discrete or separate attachment. You know, one of the trends with email is that in the past you attach a video, a figure, an image, whatever it happens to be. But we're seeing more where those attachments are actually being put in right in line, right in stream, right as a part of the email itself. So with that notion is, what about these items, the data, whether it's that structured database, whether it's that unstructured file system, or that semi-structured email? What about that data that has unknown value today? Will it have value in the future? Will it be high value, low value, or is it going to remain unknown? Or will that data finally be realized that it no longer has value? So if we look there in the middle in the blue, this is the big unknown, and this is where there's a lot of growth because you get the data in there, you're really not sure what to do with it, so put it into this limbo. Put it into this state where we're just going to keep it for a while till we can figure out what to do with it. And what we might figure out is, you know what, it has no value, let's just discard it. On the other hand, we might figure out that it has value, let's promote it. So what we're seeing here is in the center towards that right is the changing states, those changing values. Now, simply deleting the data, that might solve part of the problem, but we've got to address something else. And that is, do we have the insight, the awareness, the information to know, is it okay to delete it? If it was unknown or if it was a known value, are we okay to just simply delete it? And if we delete it, how do we make sure that it's been properly deleted, removed from the different systems, all those different capabilities, all those different needs are addressed? But this is just setting up part of the problem is that we've got data growth, but it's in different dimensions, not to mention that we have this continued increasing dependency on information. Now, having said all that about data growth and things, here's the other side to it, which is that the fundamental role of having systems, having the emails, having the file systems, the archives, is to protect, preserve, secure, and serve information. In other words, this is about where we start to set up the why, the what, and how for various applications and focus areas across different industries. In other words, the why. Why are we having this conversation about email archiving, compliance, and ransomware, and removing complexity and things like that? Well, because, as we just talked about, there's that increase in the structured, unstructured, semi-structured applications and the data. It's not just about the data, it's also about the applications. It's not just about the applications, it's about the data, because you need both the data and the applications to create and transform them into information. But there's a couple of other things going on here. Certainly there's compliance and regulatory. These could be government, or they could be industry, or they could even be self or organizational based. You've got some of the buzzwords out there: HIPAA, high-tech, EMR, GDPR, particularly for those in Europe, CFR, SARBOX, the long list of different alphabet soups. There's also concerns around litigation hold, search, and retention. So in other words, how do you figure out if that data has any value? Are you able to search it? Do you have the metadata insight to be able to go and look at information about the actual data to facilitate a search, a discovery, whether it be for litigation support, or whether it be for some other research or some other operational activity? Do you have that insight? Do you have that awareness across the different types of data, across the different sorts of applications? So in other words, it's not just looking at the content in a text file, it's also being able to look at images and using tools that you can take a base image of a photo, for example, and be able to search other content that's out there and find a match for a photo. Searching text is relatively easy. But for those of you who may be familiar with this, if you're out searching or surfing around on the web and you're using a Google browser, and if you go and you find an image somewhere, and if you right-click on that image and down on the, I think it's the towards the bottom of the properties that'll pop up, you'll see something that says search images, okay? Well, what that'll do then is Google goes out and searches and finds known matches or proximities, okay? So in other words, if you say, hey, I took this photo, I want to see if anybody else has copied it. Well, Google can do that. This is not unique to the web. It's not exclusive to Google or to the web. You also need to have this ability that internally in your own environment, your own systems, that you can search not only for text, not only for text phrases, but find matches in videos and images and audio or other sorts of content. This is part of what we start to need to plan for on a go-forward basis. So there's a lot of different reasons here. You've got a list of them that, as Chris mentioned, you can download the handouts and take a look at some of this. But something else that's happened here is we've got growing threats. In other words, there's the why we need to protect. There's certainly the compliance, the regulatories, but there's different threats. There's a lot of talk around software-defined data centers, software-defined data infrastructure, software-defined whatever you choose to define. But there's also software-defined threats. If you think about it, ransomware is a software-defined threat. A virus, malware, those are software-defined threats. Denial of service attacks, those are all software-defined threats that can impact your traditional as well as your emerging types of environments. So there's a couple of different things here. This sets up the why. And there's a couple of different things that we'll talk about as we go forward, and that's setting up the conversation for both Christoph and Dave in a little bit here, is that you can protect in a proactive way. You can invest You can invest now into the protection, into the preservation, into the preserving, securing of your information, of your data, of your applications, of your infrastructure, of your metadata, of your savings. You can do that proactively, and you might have to go to your boss and convince them that this isn't a cost overhead, but it's an asset to protect the business. And one of the ways you can do that, and we'll hopefully hear more about this as we go on today, is that you can either pay now and do it proactively and leverage it as an asset, or you may have to pay later reactively in response to something happening, response to a ransomware, response to a malware, response to some other threat. So if you're going to have to pay, why not do it up front? Why not invest? Use it as an asset, use it as a business enabler, that then it's something that rewards you instead of you having to incur that risk and pay later. Okay, so real quickly here, let's take a look at some of the different things that are going on here. And again, the idea is to protect, preserve, secure, and serve information. There's various risks, including the legacy, as well as some of the new and emerging things. Sure, there's the headline news making things, that you protect your email, you protect your structured data, you protect your unstructured file systems against the classic threats, those that make the headline news. But you also have to be able to protect against the new ones that can make headline news, the denial of services, the viruses, the malware, the ransomware, as well as that accidental or intentional acts of man, acts of nature things that can cause disruption. And those disruptions might result in loss of data or copy or theft of data or damage. It might be full or partial. But we've got these different threats that can occur and will occur. And the issue is that they're not all headline-making news events. But the ones that typically don't make the headline news are the ones that are probably more applicable, more likely to occur, and on a more frequent basis. So there's a bunch of things going on in this chart, but just think of it this way. These threats apply to organizations of all sizes. These threats are not exclusive to the large, big, giant enterprises. These threat risks are applicable from the largest to the smallest, from the biggest enterprise down to the small office, home office, all points in between. And there's various threats. They have different impacts that you can read through these. Some of them will make the headline news. Some of them can result in full or partial damage. Some of them are theft, where not only is the data taken, but your only copy is taken. Some where there's simply a copy of it. And how do you protect against that? How do you mitigate against that? But then there's also having that awareness of what do you have? What are your assets? What is those information, those different things that you have, so that you can know how to protect them. So part of this is from the left are coming in the different threat risks, the problems, the faults, the issues, the things that can occur. Coming in from the right there are the requirements, are the mandates, are the things that have to be done, whether it's reducing risk, removing cost and complexity. And then again, across all of those, or underneath that, are your different environments, legacy, virtual, cloud, robo, all of which are subject to these different attacks, these different issues. So as we continue on our journey, as we continue to build the story out, we talked a little bit about the why. Let's talk a little bit more about the what so we can transition into the how. And the what is really simple, which is you can archive, you can back up, you can restore, you can protect. So in other words, part of this protection is having protection across different time intervals against different points in time that you can go back and recover from. And that's where you have tools like archive, backup, copy data management for your email, your documents, your attachment, and your different policies that you're going to protect in various places with different technologies, having that insight, having that awareness. What do you have? What are your resources? And part of that is in the middle is your primary data, but then how does that feed in to different areas? Test, development, operational, traditional data protection, analytics, data mining. And then what are the things that need to be accomplished? Making sure that the data is immutable. In other words, it can't be changed, that you can prove that the data hasn't been changed, it hasn't been manipulated with, that you can search, you can explore, you can gain that insight, gain that awareness across different technologies using different tools. So that sets up the how. And as I mentioned, there's many different ways to protect, preserve, secure, and serve information. And that how includes error and time gaps. Error and time gaps are essentially as points in time, a version, a copy, an archive. But as of a point in time, you have a consistent view of the data. And hopefully not just of the data, but also of the applications of software that work with that, along with settings, metadata, configuration keys. But as that time, those time gaps are when you have those protection points. Think of those as your traditional recovery point objectives. Think of it as your point of an archive. Think of that as your point of protection. That air gap is the distance between what you have as a copy and what's online, what's offline, what's on-site, off-site. So that time gap is where it gives you a point to where you can go back and recover from. So if you got hit with ransomware last week, well, then you probably want to go at least a week or maybe further back in time to a different time, a point in time. That's your time gap. That's your recovery point to which you're going to recover from. However, you also want to have a copy that there's some error in between where those copies are. So you've got the copies, you've got the versions, but part of that idea is having one such that if your on-site copies are infected or get damaged, you've got something that's decoupled that hopefully hasn't been contaminated. Now, a point here to make clarify is there's a difference between air gap time caps, which are good, and gaps in coverage. A gap in coverage means you have holes in your protection. You have holes in what you're protecting, what you're archiving, what you're backing up, what you're covering. So gaps in coverage aren't good. Air gaps, time gaps are good. So we just want to clarify that real quickly. So again, all this comes back to us having that insight, having that awareness, having the tools that you can see. What do you have? Where is it? What are your copies? How many versions do you have? It's great if you've got 10 copies, but they're all the same version. Well, you may have a gap in coverage. So we want to have different points in time, different consistencies, and a way to look at this is literally, let's just jump right to a figure here. Let's just jump right to a visual, which is have those points of copies, have those versions, those points in time, those time gaps, those intervals, those protection intervals. In other words, your RPOs, is have them. So what we see going in the towards the center to the right is you see these little triangles, those little deltas, those little points in time changes. Well, what we're doing here is that we're showing different points of focus, different context, from the application down through the database, through the email systems, through the attachment, down to the file system, the operating systems. And if you notice that there's different deltas, different time gaps, different points of protection that could also be different scope. In other words, are they full? Are they partial? Is it just what changed? But the point being here is avoid treating everything the same, have multiple points of protection with different scope of coverage and context, but also that different granularity and frequency. Now, this is where somebody should say, but hey, Greg, that's all great, that's all good, but that's going to add to our cost instead of save on it. It'd be a good point. However, part of the solution should be rethinking what you protect, when you protect it, how much you're protecting, what that scope is, such that you start to find a balancing map that you're not doing full copies all the time or full archives all the time, but that you have different points in time. You rethink the protection. You rethink what's being protected, when, where, why, and for what, and also start to leverage those protection copies for multiple uses. You start to be able to use an archive as a way to defend against a ransomware, where instead of making different backup and archive copies, maybe you can start to redefine some of those protections and start using tools and technologies in new ways. So the point here is to start to get outside the box, rethink the issue. In other words, the what and the why, and now start to employ the how and with the different tools in new and different ways. So I want to show you real quick, and then we're going to transition over to, we're going to bring Christoph in here in just a moment. So Christoph, get ready, get warmed up, is just to show you that visualization of that air gap. On the left there, you see the different copies with the different versions spread out over different systems on different medias. But then we see that air gap that sits between maybe what's on-premise, on-site, and what's off-site, offline. If something happens there on the left, well, you've got a copy that's isolated such that anything that happens, and here's the thing, one of the points of a threat risk is your protection system becoming compromised, your protection software, your backup, your archive becoming damaged. So you need to have a copy of that. You need to protect your protection tools. All right, so with that, let me just give you a couple closing thoughts here for now, is remove the risk and complexity. Here's the thing. Whenever you can identify complexity, you can usually identify overhead and vice versa. If you can remove complexity, you will remove cost. That's the byproduct. There is no such thing as a data or information recession. Data value will continue to change over time. There's more data being generated and retained for longer periods of time. So we have to start rethinking the issues, rethinking the problem. Instead of just simply throwing more tools at it, start using the brain matter. Let's start thinking the problem through, working smarter in addition to working harder. Okay, so leverage archiving for compliance as well as data footprint reduction. And here's the thing. Archiving, there's also the life beyond compliance, the life beyond regulation, where you can use it as a means to reducing your data footprint, reducing your overhead. And in many cases, archiving can be that aspirin to solve a lot of data management, data center, storage, and other related headaches. So anyway, there's some information where to learn more, Redmond Magazine, Arcserve, Unitrends, my own site. But what I'd like to do at this point now is transition and bring in Christoph. And we're going to start to transition now into we talked about the what and the why. And what I want to do now is, and we touched on the how, let's bring in Christoph, who's going to talk about the how to go about addressing these different things. So Christoph Bertrand is the Vice President of Product Marketing for Arcserve, has more than 20 years of experience in the industry spanning servers, software, services, high-end systems. He's got a Bachelor of Arts degree in European Business Administration from Middle Essex University in England, as well as an MBA from Bradford University, also in England, and a degree from the ESC school in France. Christoph, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Greg. And
hey.
I think you made some very, very good points about archiving and compliance, and clearly there are lots of dimensions to be considered here. Before I get into our views and what we do for our customers, let me take a moment to remind everyone on the call of who we are at Arcserve. First of all, you may recognize the name. We've been around under the Arcserve brand for many years, but more recently we have become independent again, really a rebirth in many ways for the business, and we have also launched a number of very new and solutions around backup, unified data protection, high availability, and more recently archiving. We are a global business, so we understand what's going on around the world. We understand the needs of our customers, who are typically mid-market type of customers, where usability, ease of use, as well as a very rich feature set is necessary. And we also understand that you don't have dozens and dozens of people on your teams to do the job. You have to be very efficient with great solutions that work very intuitively, yet still provide an enterprise class type of capability. So that's what we do. We've been recognized for our technology, which provides assured recovery, for our customers. We have received many awards and, again, a very strong presence around the world with many partners. If there are some partners on this webcast today, then certainly they know of our great program. We sell software, so we're a software company, but we also sell appliances. So we've recently experienced fantastic growth in that business with taking a lot of market share, so we're very happy with that. And we're looking at very, very interesting and bright future, especially around the space of archiving. And I'd like to spend a minute, because I think there are lots of misconceptions around the definition of what an archive is versus what backup is. So backup is really only meaningful in the context of disaster recovery, in the context of a problem happening where you've lost data. It doesn't matter what the problem is. Clearly, what we're seeing, and you've highlighted it very clearly earlier today on this call, Greg, we have a big, big, big problem with ransomware as one of the major causes for what I would call an IT disaster, a logical data corruption, encryption, whatever the case may be, or an IT disaster where access to data is denied through a bunch of, methodologies that keep evolving faster than we can catch up with them. So at the end of the day, when a problem happens and you've lost data, you've lost the server, or encryption has started maybe on a machine, well, what you want to do is you want to effectively get yourself in a position to recover those files or that whole server potentially, or multiple servers depending on the spread of the problem. So that's backup. Backup is not an archive. I want to be very clear. It does not meet the requirements of compliance. It does not meet best practices for legal search. So if you think you have a good compliance solution with a backup solution, it doesn't matter what the source is. Could be Exchange, could be 365. I will tell you, you do not. As you pointed out, an archive has to be immutable, and therefore every email that's ingoing and outgoing has to be captured, and it has to be made immutable, and will stay in the archive until it expires. Now you can treat those emails and add some certain characteristics to them to manage that better, obviously for your purposes, but fundamentally you cannot touch those emails once they're in until the retention policy sets them to expire and disappear from the archive. So that's very, very important because it really explains, this is the underlying technology that explains the actual necessity of doing so because of the use cases. The use cases are really in three big buckets, and I think you touched upon all of them today. The first one is to meet regulatory compliance requirements. So I use the same term, the alphabet soup. I mean, there are so many requirements across the board. Doesn't matter what industry you're in, what company size you're in. If you think you're not exposed to compliance, let me tell you, you've got a big problem. You have a lot of compliance rules that sometimes even contradict themselves, where you have to keep data for a while, then expire it, or you have to essentially not delete it at all because of legal holds, for example, which would be more of the legal risk, which I can cover as well. As I explained, because data is immutable, or email archives, in this case, in our solution, are immutable. They cannot be deleted from the archive until they expire based on their retention policy. For this reason, it means that if you're going to search across the archive for the purpose of legal searches, you will find everything that pertains to the search terms. We use an advanced technology. We're not using an archaic stubbing sort of or stub-based technology. We use a very advanced technology that allows us to attach metadata and also do lots of advanced searches, including Boolean searches and things like that. So this is great because to mitigate legal risk, you can also, again, empower your end users or the functional leads to do that. As an IT lead, really, if you've ever had to search for emails using an email backup and recovering that backup and looking for certain emails or terms, it takes a long time. One of our early adopters of this solution has essentially told us, look, I had a lawsuit last year, and This was an employee who had left the business or the organization, and it took me hours and hours to get some of the data, and I'm not sure I got everything, back to the legal counsel. So that's how you mitigate legal risk, by having everything, knowing you have everything, and being able to produce it quickly. There's another advantage, operational efficiency. You can then easily get the results, empower the functional lead, and empower the end users too. And finally, there's also a storage efficiency advantage. For example, not having 3, 4, 5 years of emails on your production server makes no sense. Why not ingest all those years into an archive and only keep a few months of email on your Exchange server on premises? Maybe you're off premises. Maybe you're moving off premises, moving to a 365 environment. You're not going to move 4 years of email and all those mailboxes to 365. You pay by the box, essentially. So why do that? You need an email archive in this case. And by doing so, you're both saving yourselves costs, either in operational costs or services costs, in the case of the migration I mentioned, or storage costs on-premise. So there are a number of benefits, again, with having email archiving. By the way, in the mid-market, email archiving is really the majority of the archiving requirement. So definitely a very important solution to have. Again, I will reiterate before I get into the topology of how we do this, that a backup is not an archive, okay? A backup does not meet compliance requirements, does not help with advanced searches. And in the case of the Office 365 environment, for example, although there are some options there for backup or for archives, those are limited and do not meet many needs that most businesses and organizations have. The Arcserve UDP archiving topology allows you to essentially leverage our virtual archiving appliance, which comes in 3 flavors, as you can see. It's also a multi-tenant solution, so if you're an organization with multiple companies or multiple sub-organizations, maybe you're in different industries, vertically integrated, for example, where different compliance rules apply to you, different email names or domains apply to your business. Well, we can really manage that very easily with this solution. And we're going to give access and really leave the onus of accessing older emails to the user and empowering them that way, because the last thing you want to do as an IT manager is having to deal with many email searches for individual users because they just can't get to that email that's been archived. The other point I want to make is you can also, of course, easily create those rules, those compliance rules as an administrator, or manage multiple domains as a super admin. But as an auditor, this is where you gain the ability to go search across the overall archive and really get to the point where you're fully empowered to create those searches, run the searches on a regular basis, export the results for whatever purpose you have. And typically we're going to see auditors being functions such as legal, HR, everybody has in the mid-market as employees. And this is a very important type of capability. The search is really, combined with the immutability you mentioned earlier, those two combined is really where you get a tremendous amount of benefits from having archiving technology for your email. So I mentioned that we've designed our UDP solution from the get-go, and it's been in market for about almost, 3 years now? 4 years almost, because we launched it in we launched in 2014. So we've had the ability to grow the business from 0 customers to, I think we're close to probably 25,000 now. We had 22 on the slide, but we've just done our count again, and it's growing fast and faster, and also available as an appliance. So for those of you who like appliances, we have that. One of the things we did with UDP is we designed it with ease of use in mind. And we've done the same thing as we've added this archiving module to the offering. We do everything on the basis of a web-based interface. So while it's very powerful and you can double-click and triple-click, you don't need to be a PhD in backup to be able to do a lot with this solution, protect your environment, recover your data. or archive your emails. So lots of ease of use built in, and for the archiving module, we have a great Outlook plugin that works so naturally for end users. So again, ease of use, absolutely critical in the space we deal with, and really an important aspect of our solution. So we've talked about archiving, and I want to sort of tie this back to ransomware and then talk about what we do with our backup and recovery solution or component, if you will, of the Arcserve UDP portfolio, because there's a slightly different perspective there as well. So when it comes to email archiving and ransomware, first of all, I want to go back to my earlier point, backup versus recovery versus archiving. So backup in and of itself is not that interesting except for one thing. Depending on the frequency that you put in place, then your ability to recover data that's fresh enough at a point in time that makes sense for you and is going to change. So you want to back up often, and the more critical, the more you want to protect. We're very unique in that we offer a high availability option as well in our offering, so you can literally do continuous replication and automated failover and fail back if you want to. So recovery, again, the backup and recovery process will back up, for example, a mailbox or a series of mailboxes at a point in time. But if you've deleted email in it, it's not going to be there. Those emails are gone, and they get back. The box gets backed up without them. Versus an archive, in which case I've captured everything in and out, and even if as an end user I delete that email from my inbox, it is going to be in the archive until it expires, until the retention policy is met. So the good news is that obviously you can ask yourself, well, hang on, if you're ingesting emails that could be infected by ransomware in an archive, aren't you taking a risk? Well, the good news is that we have no risk of infection with inside our archive, so we have technology that allows us to control execution type of permissions. And I'd like to spend a minute on that, because when we talk about ransomware, I think there are lots of misconceptions. First of all, the misconception that Linux environments are not exposed to ransomware or are more resilient. Actually, it turns out that the statistics are starting to change and invert themselves. There are some great blogs and great articles around those misconceptions. So don't think that because you have Linux, you're immune from ransomware, and don't think because you have a Windows environment, which of course many customers of ours have as well, that you are more exposed. Everybody is exposed. Everybody will be hit by ransomware. I was just talking to our vice president of IT by the coffee machine earlier today, and he's told me that and because we're using UDP archiving, I was asking him how things are going, and he's told me, as we were talking about this ransomware and archiving webcast, that we had about 6 or 7 attacks in the past few weeks that is intercepted. So everybody gets a chance to practice their interception skills on this one. So the other thing I want to point out here is that as you look at archiving and how you could use it in a ransomware context, the fact that you've kept every email that's come in and out, of course you want to put some safeguards on not executing those attachments that are infected, but you could literally go look and in a QA environment figure out how the infection spreads and do lots of forensics on that. Also search across your archives to see who's been infected and maybe take some preemptive actions against those emails that are infected that haven't been opened yet in a live environment. So there are many ways to leverage, again, archiving and ransomware. And hey, look, if you've been attacked, you're going to put those attacks on legal hold. You're going to make sure that those emails never expire so you can keep them as proof for whatever purpose later. Ransomware is a criminal activity, and therefore you want to protect your business, your organization, and one way to do that is to make sure you keep the evidence of that. So let me sort of switch gears a little bit, and now that we've talked about ransomware, I want to talk about one of the remediations for ransomware is really recovery. And we talked about email archiving as part of the UDP portfolio here. Of course, the backup and recovery components as well, and I'm going to explain that in the next 5 minutes or so, as well as provide you with some guidance and some best practices. Let me start by saying first, and we've talked to many security companies as part of our ecosystem of partners. We spend a lot of time with them as we discuss this topic. And I think there is also a misconception that somehow when an attack has started, you can automatically stop it and then get everything back on track just like that. There's no push button. You need to have a very comprehensive security solution. We do not sell security solutions because we're a backup and recovery company, a cloud company, an appliance business for disaster recovery. Security is very specialized, and it takes many years of experience and expertise to really do this right. And every security company will tell you, once the ransomware has executed and it starts encrypting files, for example, just to take an example, whether you detect it or not, at the end of the day, you've got a problem. You haven't stopped it. And in a sense, your security has failed. It's kind of like, the weatherman telling you it's raining outside. Hey, it's raining outside. Well, good. What am I going to do with that? So I think the real question is, when it comes to security, think about the whole ransomware equation as really sort of complementary themes where you have to have a comprehensive security strategy and policy that starts with user education and goes through leveraging the right tools and filters to really intercept the threats before they come in, and as they come in, stop them in a way that's efficient and professional. And operationally, you have to really think about how you're going to recover. It's not that easy. If you don't know how much you never really know how much the infection is spread until or unless you use some very specific tools that can determine that for you, and then you have to make the determination whether you want to recover files, folders, or just the whole thing. We have one customer example where I show you that. So our backup and recovery and disaster recovery solution really comes in the form of software, traditional software that you can deploy on a server or in the form of an appliance. It comes with very unique capabilities, such as global deduplication, which is certainly a very, very efficient process. And it allows you to, for example, if you wanted to if you have multiple sites, decentralized type of infrastructure, you could use an appliance in those remote sites and replicate. It's built in, there's no extra cost. Replicate the data that runs on a UDP server or a UDP appliance to a primary site and go back and forth and maybe even cross-protect those sites. What's very nice is the deduplication is global. So whatever data you've deduplicated on site A, we have in the repository, and it sort of carries over to site B. So we never have to copy those blocks again. It gives you amazing efficiency on the storage side of things. If you go to our website, our blog site, you'll see we have screenshots of that our customers have sent us where we can literally save them 95% of storage by using our solution. So we are really global, and we are doing this at the source. So again, there's really no traffic or very little traffic once we've captured a block. We only capture changed blocks. So it really optimizes everything from the network traffic in the backup process to the storage that you have to use. And what's very nice about UDP is that it was designed really, it's a modern solution, but it was really designed, as I said, with ease of use. It was designed also with the cloud in mind. So we support public clouds. We support AWS. You can do, we have a number of technologies we use, including virtualization, where we can do instant virtual machines for recovery purposes, virtual standby. All of these capabilities come in handy when you have to recover from ransomware. Once ransomware is hit, once you've stopped it, you have to go figure out the recovery strategy. That's the remediation. And that's where you need a backup that's fresh, a backup that's easy to activate, or more importantly, as we offer here, a virtual standby system that you can just go activate and go run your servers from those virtual machines. So lots of capabilities in Arcserve UDP against ransomware, and of course, the ability to also send a lot of this data off-site, whether you want to send it to S3 as a tape replacement, whether you want to put it on tape, which we support, as well, and we support every tape, pretty much every tape system there is out there to cover the point that Greg made earlier of having data off-site and offline, really. And of course, the fact you can easily replicate and make multiple copies. All of these are very useful tools to have and leverage as you build your recovery strategy, and very likely with ransomware as the cause in mind of the problem you're trying to solve. So if I net it all up, this is our portfolio. On the right-hand side, as you can see, we provide backup and recovery, high availability. We talked about archiving, disaster recovery. We do this on-premise, in the cloud. We have an appliance offering. Again, that's really something you should check out if you prefer the appliance form factor. We know it's a hybrid world out there, so in a hybrid world, you want to provide a lot of capabilities and options to deploy the technology. So I would like to give you a quick example, very simple as we close this conversation here. It was one of our customers, actually one of our partners, that uses our solution as a service provider and was dealing with one of their customer, which is a multi-site medical center for senior citizens. So what that means is that here the attack took place essentially on the basis of a compromised area in the network. So the network shares essentially spread the ransomware attack. The good news is that and that was through essentially a phishing email. So this is typically what happens. There are a number of targeted attacks. Some industries are targeted. Some specific businesses are being targeted. We have lots of information about that, and we see a lot of our customers in the medical space being targeted by those phishing emails. So, of course, click happy user, clicked on that. It spread through the shares. Very typical case of a ransomware attack, and with an attack that started where the incident was declared at 8:30. In about 3 hours, they were back on their feet with what was a pretty widespread scenario here based on the conversation we had, and zero data loss. So they were very lucky. They were fortunate. And what's important is that they had some good processes in place to declare the incident and call our UDP partner who helped them get back on their feet. So again, I have many, many examples. We don't have time for them. I literally have dozens of examples of similar cases that have happened to our customers. And what they tell us is, look, you have great best practices to protect the backup environment. You have many ways to recover data, and you've really saved my rear end a couple of times already. So I think, it's great to hear when you're a vendor, but I have to tell you, as an end user listening to us today, you never want to put yourself in this position. So again, think security first, and hopefully you also have devised a great backup and recovery strategy because, one of these days, one of them will go through. So in conclusion, what I'd like to do is share some recommendations. So of course, backup, and backup. Maybe I should have just said that on the slide. Education is very, very key. There are some great companies out there that provide testing, education, and best practices to your end users and to yourselves, the IT folks. And even in IT, you need to remember there are some things you can do or should not do. The best one I heard was opening a webmail browser in a backup server environment, and that thing didn't go well for that admin. It happens to everybody, but you should not allow these type of behaviors. You should also have very, very, very strong administrative rules and access rules. Don't give access to people to stuff that people should not have access to. So that's the principle of least privilege, and this is a very important one. Again, these are not just backup and recovery principles or archiving principles. They're just good, sound best practices for IT in general terms. As I said, and I will reiterate this, comprehensive security solutions and internal policies. Okay, you have to deal with specialists on this. We're backup and recovery, disaster recovery specialists. We understand this space very well, and certainly the security space is one that also has a ton of expertise, and There are some great companies out there, and I really highly recommend you leverage them as part of the holistic strategy. And again, as I said, don't fall for the marketing hype. Always talk to specialists, and more importantly, educate your end users. So that's it for me, Greg. I'd like to turn it back to you.
Hey, great. Thanks, Christoph, for the good insights as to how to address the various issues from an Arcserve perspective. Hey, now let's bring Dave LeClair in for a Unitrends view on the how to address the various email compliance, archiving, ransomware issues. So Dave LeClair is VP, Vice President of Product Marketing at Unitrends, a leader in data protection and disaster recovery. Dave has 25 years of engineering and marketing experiences working for both technology startups as well as established companies. Prior to joining Unitrends, he was a Senior Director of Strategy and Product Management at Stratus Technology, where he was responsible for worldwide product management and corporate marketing. Hey, Dave, you there?
Yes, I am, Greg.
Are you all warmed up, ready to go?
I am.
All right, take it away.
So I am going to talk a little bit today about really ways you can actually take some of the backup and IT resilience technology that's available today and really use it to kind of reduce your complexity, get more productivity out of your environment, and really be more protected for email, for compliance, and just protecting your business in general. So I'm going to start and actually talk a little about some of the traditional problems that we hear constantly from people that they struggle with keeping their data and business continuity up. And there's some obvious things. Obviously, we're all dealing with massive amounts of data growth. We're dealing with requirements of our business to absolutely have zero downtime. We're dealing with increasing regulatory and compliance issues, particularly if you're talking about multinational companies. We have new instances of regulations coming online in EMEA, for example. But we also hear from a lot of people that are really just struggling with the amount of time it actually takes to validate and have confidence actually in their ability to recover. So validating that your backups will be successful, validating that your DR environment is going to work when you depend on it is really a challenge. And that's kind of been the case for a long time. Now we're dealing with new challenges such as ransomware, which really is an absolute epidemic that is really affecting everyone in our industry. To date, about 60% of enterprises have been hit by ransomware in some form. Most of those actually were down for considerable periods of time on the servers that they were hit. Many of them actually had to pay the ransom. So this is really an ongoing and ongoing threat. In addition to that, we're also having to deal with new architectures. It's no longer simply an on-premise world. We used to talk about having to protect virtual and physical resources. Now it's virtual, physical, cloud resources. Cloud resources can be split among multiple clouds. You might have resources that are running in Azure as well as AWS and in SaaS applications like Office 365. And those all need protection too. Office 365 in particular has become very popular, both with mid-size and small customers, but also with some of the largest companies in the world have shifted over to the SaaS model for their email. And the protection that comes out of the box from Microsoft on Office 365 is pretty limited. Deleted emails, if a user goes in and actually deletes an email, the standard policy in Office 365 is simply to hold on to that email in a recycle bucket for 14 days. You can change that. You can raise it up to a maximum of 30 days. After that, it's gone. It's gone forever. With SharePoint and OneDrive files, which are also part of the Office 365 suite, you get a little bit more. You get about 6 months before it's gone. But those two, if they're deleted by a user, either intentionally or accidentally, they potentially disappear forever. And most data loss is due to user errors. There are ways of actually deleting things in Office 365 that actually permanent delete and actually will skip the 14 to 30-day window altogether. So many enterprises don't realize they aren't fully protected. We talk with many that just assume that, of course, Microsoft is running backups for them. If they need to actually recover something, that they'll be able to do it. Even if Microsoft is able to do it in that 14 to 30-day window, it's a very manually intensive, multiple steps to actually go in, kind of remount PSTs, find the email that was potentially deleted and restore it. It's very complicated. So this is another new challenge to making sure that you have what's in place to make sure that you're not going to be losing important emails for whatever reason. And if it feels like some of these challenges are accelerating, it's really because they are. The amount of data that we actually have is growing much faster than the amount of IT resources we have to manage it. We're actually seeing data grow at about a 50x rate, where IT administrators over the next 5 to 10 years are only going to grow by about 50%. So it's really a 33 times faster growth rate. The ransomware attacks, the projections are that ransomware attacks, as bad as they are right now, are going to get worse. They're going to double every year for the next 3 or 4 years is the projection from most security experts. And businesses that are getting hit, it's no longer just a $500 fee to unlock your files. Many businesses, matter of fact, this stat here on this chart says 50% of businesses that have been attacked have had to pay more than $10,000 to basically get all of their data back. All this is leading to a challenge where we're as an industry, experiencing lots of downtime, which is costing our businesses literally billions of dollars. North American businesses last year alone lost about $700 billion simply in downtime cost alone. So these challenges are actually getting worse. So one of the things that we believe at Unitrends is our job is to increase uptime and increase the confidence of IT in a world where IT simply must do more with less. Nobody has their budgets growing at the rate that their data is growing. No one has enough cycles to learn the new things. We're feeling more and more stress. No one wakes up in the morning and says, oh boy, I get to go into work today and do the backups, or I hope I get to use my DR environment. We have to find ways of actually having some of these tools and tasks become much easier. So we're going to focus, I'm going to talk about 4 things today. I'm going to focus on how we can help you do more with less by reducing complexity, how we can help you protect everything you have, including all those virtual and physical workloads, as well as everything you have in your cloud. How do you actually maximize protection from ransomware attacks, and how you can actually use your backups for more than just backups, how you can actually use them to get more productivity out of yourself and your team, how you can actually get better IT resiliency using some of the analytics and automation that is available today. So with that, my first bullet point, as I said, how do you basically do more with less by reducing complexity? What we've done is we've taken an approach where we've ruthlessly focused on simplifying how you do backup, how you deploy it, how you manage it, and we've done this by building an all-in-one solution. So if you look at an old-world approach that many backup providers have done literally for decades, it's really involved bringing in multiple stacks of hardware and software, and now that we've brought cloud and DR into it, there's even more stacks. So all told, you're talking about bringing in servers and storage, virtualization, installing operating systems, installing backup software on top of that just to do your local backups. If you want to actually move those backups off-site to a cloud, you're talking about going out and acquiring third-party cloud resources, the compute to run the backup software, attaching additional infrastructure as a service storage on top of that. And then if you actually want to verify that it's all working, you're probably looking at additional either software or lots of scripting and lots of time to basically bring it all together. What we've done is we focused on bringing that into a single solution from a single vendor. So we've basically rolled all the hardware and software, operating system, everything into a physical appliance that ranges in size to meet your needs. Our boxes actually go from about 2 terabytes up to about 200 terabytes in size, and you can actually stack as many of those as you need. We've actually have the ability to manage tens of thousands of appliances simultaneously from a single user interface, really, so you can manage petabytes of data within a single instance. In addition, we've also built our own purpose-built cloud that's designed specifically for storing your backup for long-term retention, for compliance reasons, as well as for disaster recovery. We have a disaster recovery as a service capability that runs in our cloud, all designed to basically be from one vendor, very easy to roll out, very easy to manage. If something goes wrong, you only have one vendor that you have to deal with to basically get it resolved. If you do want to actually bring your own hardware, we do have a software solution that doesn't install just as software. It actually installs as a virtual appliance. So we've still done a lot of the integration for you. And if you want to bring your own cloud, we work with just about every cloud out there, AWS, Google, Azure, Rackspace. So if you do want to bring your own cloud, it's certainly possible to do that. But for those that want it all from a single vendor, we give you the option. And again, we're trying to basically make this easier for you, to basically reduce the complexity of managing the full stack required to protect your business. The second point that I said is we want to be able to protect everything you have, physical, virtual, cloud workloads. We support well over 250 different variations of hypervisors, operating systems, applications. In addition to that, as I said, we support a wide variety of infrastructure as a service providers, as well as provide a solution that actually will protect your Office 365 assets as well. We do have some other capabilities that will be coming down the line to add some additional SaaS capabilities in the near future as well. I wanted to basically just touch on the Office 365 solution from Unitrends just briefly to give you an idea of, again, focusing on making things as easy and as simple as possible. Our solution is a very simple service that automatically backs up your entire Office 365 environment. As you add additional users, they automatically basically have their email, their OneDrive files, any SharePoint sites that they basically create, they all automatically get backed up. If one of them accidentally deletes a file, instead of having to go through a process that may take hours to get that file back, you can literally go in and with a few clicks in a few seconds basically restore that email for them. In addition, we provide unlimited retention, so you don't have to worry about that 14 to 30-day window. We will retain your emails for as long as you need it. Even if you actually remove users from your system, we will still retain their emails, because just because an employee has left your business doesn't necessarily mean that you don't still have to retain their emails for compliance reasons. So again, we're basically trying to make this as simple as possible. There's really nothing to install. It's a service. You basically contact us. We basically we'll back up your data from Office 365 actually and store it in the cloud. So my third point is really talking about ransomware, and we have talked about ransomware a fair amount in this call already today. One thing I do want to say, and I'm probably going to conflict a little bit with something Christoph said, we do focus a lot on reducing the risk of ransomware getting into your backups. And this is a legitimate concern. A lot of Windows software vendors have actually had the backup database be encrypted as well. And that could be a worst case scenario where not only your files on your server encrypted, but your backup is encrypted. And this is not a made-up thing. There's actually instances that you can read about in some of our competitors' forums where they actually have customers ask, I got hit, my data is encrypted, how do I get it back? And the response is, you really don't. One of the things that we do is we are running on Linux. It does reduce the risk. There's simply much more Windows ransomware attacks than Linux. There are ransomware versions that attack Linux, just like there are that attack Macs and iOS and everything else. Ransomware will basically go after anywhere that there's a footprint. But there's many more attacks that basically go after Windows. But we don't think we're protected simply because we're running on Linux. We think we're protected because we're actually running on a hardened appliance. We're locking that appliance down. Ports aren't necessarily open. We've hardened it. We've actually locked that appliance down as much as we possibly can to make sure that your backups are going to be protected. So the fourth point that I do want to spend a bit more time on is actually talking about how you can actually use your backups for more than backup. And I do think this is where our industry is really going. Backup, in many ways, has been somewhat commoditized. A lot of the vendors have similar features. Similar to what happened kind of with the hypervisor market. The difference between hypervisors is not all that great. Where the differentiation is really happening in the hypervisor space or the virtualization space is around the tools and what you can actually do to manage those environments and get more productive. And that's one of the things I want to talk about. Unitrends actually for a while has something that we call recovery assurance. Recovery assurance allows you to use your backups to validate whether that your backup is good, that you're going to be able to recover, and if you have a DR environment, to use your backups to spin up your DR environment and actually test to make sure that you can recover, and all your recovery point objectives and recovery time objectives are being met in actuality. So kind of comparing it versus the old world, where you kind of built your DR environment, you kind of did your backups, and then you pray that they're going to successfully recover. This really removes all that doubt. We can fully automate at an application level the testing of both the failover and failback of using your backups, so you know without a doubt that things are working properly. And because it's automated, you don't have to test your DR environment, your backups, once a quarter, once a year. You can test them as often as you like. So we actually fully automate this. You can actually have a report emailed to you that basically proves that your applications are all meeting your recovery objectives. The way we do this is we have a few different forms of automation technology. So what's required? In order to do this beyond just validating that your application booted and at the VM level, we actually test even complex end-tier applications. So if you have boot order sequences, you can specify those. We will make sure that your applications boot in the order that they need to boot in. If you need to test specific applications, we're not just validating that the application is running. We will actually make calls into the application. If it's a SQL application, we'll make SQL calls into it and make sure that we get responses back that look intelligent. If you have a custom app, we can even have custom scripts that validate kind of what you expect that application to do once it's up and running. So this is a very rich capability that allows you to have absolute confidence. And because we know that we don't want to affect your production environment, this is all done in a sandbox environment. So we spin this up. We actually isolate the network, basically have virtual network assignments, remodel all the networking, run these tests in the sandbox, and then we kind of move everything back once the tests are complete. It's technology we've had. We can do this for both virtual as well as physical workloads. And like I said, you get this nice compliance report that's delivered to your business stakeholders that confirm that your environment and your backups and your DR is working exactly as you'd expect. We've had this for a couple years, and we've started to actually use it for some new use cases and extend what we can do with this. So one example of how you can use this would be to use it in a ransomware scenario. So there's really 5 things if you're thinking about how to fully protect from ransomware besides kind of user education. Obviously, you want to protect and be able to recover, so be able to back up and recover. You want to make sure that you're securing your backups as we talked about. But you can use this technology to actually test your backups and make sure that your backups haven't been corrupted and that they're functioning exactly as you'd expect. The other thing that we're able to do now is we've built in analytics to detect when ransomware is, we believe, starting to hit your system. So we actually do have ransomware detection that's proactive built into our software now. It uses some adaptive and predictive analytics, and we have a lot of knowledge of what's going on with your data. We understand kind of what a typical change rate is on a box. We understand which files should be changing and which are not. There's a whole bunch of indicators that we can look at, and if something suddenly deviates from those norms, you may not be getting hit with ransomware, but you might be. If suddenly all your files are being encrypted, we're going to see that sudden rise in change rate, and we're going to be able to basically alert that something's going on there. And again, it's not going to prevent the ransomware because you've already been infected. It's in that system. It's already having an impact on those files. But it may prevent you to be alerted just a little bit earlier. It may allow you to actually make sure that you can isolate that system to make sure it doesn't spread to other systems that may be connected by networking or other means. It may allow you to do something about it before ransomware actually decides to pop up and the wonderful screen that basically says, yeah, you're infected, we want your payment. You may be able to actually take action before that actually takes place. So if we detect something, we will alert you. You'll basically get a proactive email alert and allows you to basically get a head start on doing something about it. The other things that we've recently announced in our version 10, which we just announced this last week, we're going to be bringing this to general availability in June. But in dealing with and talking about compliance, one of the things is there can be a lot of steps, particularly if you have a large environment, to basically set up all your SLAs and manage them and make sure that they're actually being maintained. So we've made it much easier to define, analyze, and report on your SLA management. So we now have the ability to have SLA policy automation in our tool. So what does that do? It controls the initiation and flow of backups and what we call backup copies, what others typically call archives. But it basically allows you to control the flow of your backups and your backup copies through a single, simple policy. The way it works is all you have to do is simply set the RPO, retention, and the location of where you want your backups and your backup copies to go. And our software automatically will set up the necessary backups, necessary retention policies, set up all the things to basically move your data to where you want it to go, off-site or to removable media. And it basically simplifies this. Some of the benefits we see are from some SME customers. They've actually been talking about how easy this makes it and how, in many cases, they weren't entirely sure what their RPOs and RTOs were going to be beforehand. Now they set it. We actually will make sure that you're maintaining that. Our enterprise customers are finding that this makes it far easier for them to set up and remain compliant with their external demands from things like HIPAA and SOX. It's real simplicity, it's real confidence, and it's freeing up time for them to go work on other things, which is really what we're trying to do with our mission. So the way this works, it really is pretty simple. You kind of go in, you set your RPO in terms of hours and minutes that you want it to. You basically specify where you want your backup copies to go. A hot backup target would be something like Unitrends Cloud, where we're keeping your backup copies in sync on a regular basis. A cold backup copy might be something like putting it on tape or putting it on removable media or moving it into such as an S3 storage bucket. And then you basically define what your backup retention, how long you want to keep your backups. Do you want to be warned when you're starting to hit certain limits on your appliance, or when you're before we actually do deletions? So again, making it very easy to define and manage this. The last thing in the SLA, if this looks very familiar, it's because this is essentially the same report that you get from our recovery assurance technology. Not only can we help you set and maintain the settings, we can also use our recovery assurance technology to send you an automated report that's actually proving that your backups are working properly and you actually are everything is going as well. If somebody trips and accidentally unplugs a cable, we're going to detect it. We're going to alert you that something has gone wrong in your recovery environment, so you can do something about it before you have to rely on that environment. And then the last thing in this kind of same idea of being able to do more with your backups than just simply use them for backups. We now have the ability to do automated provisioning, what some others call copy data management. But what this allows you to do, it allows you to use your backups and use your backup environment as essentially a lab for testing, for doing other types of experiments that you don't want to do in your production environment. So one use case of this would be if you want to actually test your patches. Rather than doing it in your production environment or doing it in a secondary environment, you can actually use your backup environment and use the appliance. We can actually use the backup, orchestrate an instant recovery into our on-demand lab. It's isolated from your production environment. It allows you to basically control access, basically test everything you want to test of that patch. When you think it's successful, you can either roll it out or even basically do a recovery from that environment straight into your actual environment. So again, focus on trying to make this as simple and as easy as possible. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. I think I'm going to bring Greg back in, and I think we're going to do a few minutes of Q&A here at the end.
Hey, great. Thanks, Dave, for the great insights. How Unitrends can address the various issues around email, compliance, ransomware, data protection, archiving in general, along with related issues. Hey, so let's bring Christoph back in and take some questions from the audience. We'd like to have a lively Q&A session. So as a reminder, please go ahead and enter your questions into the Ask a Question box in the lower left side of your console. We actually got a question queued up here. And Dave, since you're right there, we'll give you the first shot at this and then have Christoph bring his perspective in. And the question is this, how is versioning working in your products and its impact for backup or archive along with storage size impact? Dave?
As far as versioning, as far as being able to tag different versions of your backups, yeah, that's something, it's kind of a standard feature we have. So what was the second part of it? Impact on backup or storage size?
And then what's its impact on storage? But also probably taking the variation of that is what does the size of the data have as part of an impact?
Yeah, I mean the size of the data. I mean we do a lot of different things to make sure that we're kind of reducing the amount of data we have to store. So we're doing compression. We're doing data deduplication, both kind of inline and post processing. Your mileage is probably going to vary based on the type of data you have. We see some workloads that have very high change rates and very low kind of deduplication, which requires you to kind of have more local storage. We see others that that compress and dedupe very well. One of the things that from an archiving standpoint, by having kind of a hybrid cloud solution that includes both local storage as well as cloud, we're able to actually work with our customers and in many cases kind of reduce the amount of local retention that they actually have to have by actually taking many of the kind of later versions or older copies of data that may still need to be stored and actually pushing them off into the cloud and storing them actually in our cloud. So that's one way we're kind of trying to reduce the amount of local storage that you actually have to have either in your appliance or actually attached to the software solution.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Hey, Christoph, why don't you join us back in the conversation here? And what about from a Arcserve perspective, versioning work, versioning with your technology, with your solution, the impact of the size of the storage, how you're able to reduce the overhead, How about your perspective?
Yeah, so a couple of answers here in the sense that there's really backup and then there's archiving. So slightly different answers, but I want to cover both. So for the more traditional sort of backup and recovery, we use a global source-size deduplication. So there's no, it's all done, at our server. There's no post-processing or anything like that. It all happens on the fly. Extremely efficient. As a matter of fact, that's what allows us to really provide for a lot of backup data on a much smaller footprint, and we are very conservative, but our backup appliances literally back up 3, 4, 5x more data than is actually on board in terms of storage because of that deduplication that happens at a block level. So that's number one. That's one of the things you can do for backup and recovery. And of course, there's also the ability to send some data off to maybe the cloud, like an S3, for example, type of storage, if that's what you prefer to do in public cloud, or to tape even. So you would, in that sense, sort of offload some of the storage requirements if you want to do that. And of course, it's very easy to go recover whatever recovery point based on that. There's built-in automation all the way through. So that's really the backup and recovery piece of it. Also, the other thing is on the archiving piece of it, because you're dealing with email archiving in this case, we have optimization through single instance storage of emails, which is also extremely efficient. You can literally ingest hundreds of thousands of emails. And say you have one email and you send it to everybody in your company, you have 500 people, there's a big attachment. We're not going to go back up that or archive that email 500 times with the attachment. We'll do it once and then understand who has it and where it is. In addition, I think there are other technologies out there that are pretty archaic that use an HSM or hierarchical storage management type of process whereby you essentially leave a stub where you've taken a file into the archive. We don't do that. We look at those emails in our case and their attachments as the objects, and we attach metadata to that. So that's how we do it. So a very different perspective, very modern in that sense, and again, very complementary for both archiving and backup. Also, finally, I want to just point out that all of that single instance storage does not change the immutability of the email archive we have. You cannot go delete an email, and that's why we do not recommend using backups for archives.
Okay, great. So I'm going to come right back to you, Christoph, then we're going to jump to Dave. We're got a couple minutes here, so I need a real quick, tight answer on this, is what should I do today? That could actually be right after we're done with this webinar, but what can I do today to prevent, protect, and respond to ransomware that might happen tomorrow? So in other words, what's that takeaway? What are those quick little bullet points that you could tell somebody, go ahead and do this right now, starting today, to protect for tomorrow? You there? Hello?
I'm still here, but Dave must be on mute.
No, that was to you, Christoph.
Yeah, but if you're not ready, Christoph, Dave, if you want to.
I'm ready. I'm ready. It's a very simple answer. First of all, give us a call, and we'll be happy to walk you through what we can do to help. And I would say, but firstly, take a good look around at the security type of solutions that are out there, and I would say start with a very thorough understanding of your security situation as well as your backup situation. What are your actual RPOs and RTOs, and again, how this is really something that doesn't have necessarily an immediate fix, but can be addressed very quickly. However, there are some simple things you can do both on the security side and certainly on the backup and recovery side. There are a number of things you can do as well.
Great. Thanks, Christoph. Dave, how about real quick from you, that punch list?
Yeah, I think it's real quick and short. There's two things. It starts with backup. It's your first line of defense. It's your best line of defense. Make sure you're backing everything up that you care about. If it's not backed up, you're not going to be able to recover it. Second thing is user education. That's the best thing you can do to kind of prevent ransomware from coming in. Educate your users to not click on suspicious emails, not go to suspicious websites and download things. if you can prevent it from getting in, then you don't have to worry about recovery.
All right. Hey, great. Thanks both Dave and Christoph. And with this, I'm going to pass it back to Chris because it looks like we're out of time.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. Great presentations. Thank you so much for your time today, everybody. Really excellent presentations from all the presenters. And Greg, thank you so much for a great keynote speech. And everybody in the audience, thank you for hanging out with us for the complete hour and a half today. That's just tremendous. Thank you so much. 90 minutes of your day is really valuable to give up, so we really appreciate you taking your time to do that. Today's Supercast has been sponsored by Arcserve and Unitrends and brought to you by RedmondMag.com. Thank you all for attending today's webcast. If you had a question and it didn't get answered, no worries. We'll make sure to get back in touch with you after the show. And don't forget to check out all the great resources from both companies in the resource tab down there in the dock of your screen. But thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.